So how big does an ocean-faring ship need to be before you feel safe on it?
Where I feel safe on it.
Feel safe on it.
Like, I mean, are we talking about a certain type of ship? Because like
No, like
I
how I guess how big does a ship like any kind of vessel how big does it need to be before you feel like you're safe on it? Like are you safe on a little fishing boat compared to like a cruise ship or a warship? Would you feel safest on a battleship?
I'm pretty comfortable on ships. I have my boating license. I can drive boats.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I I wish I was good with boats. I would really like to be good with boats. One time back in like I think 2011, I sailed from North Germany to Denmark to a Danish island called Aero in fucking it must have been October, I think. And that was when people talk about sailing and how beautiful it is. That was not my experience. That boat was fucking sideways for 8 hours and it was fucking awful. But an adventure.
Yeah, because I would say honestly, weirdly enough, the smaller the ship that I have control over, I would feel safer in.
Really?
Like I've never been on a cruise ship and I have no idea how I'm gonna like deal with being on a cruise ship. I've
Right.
been on ferries, obviously, but like I don't much care for them. I don't feel unsafe, but I don't like it. So, but I don't know.
No ship is big enough. Don't go on the ocean. You will fucking die. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's the answer for me. Fuck this. Fuck this boating nonsense.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Yeah,
Adam.
we were talking to Robert the other day, right, Adam, about it, and I was fascinated. It was he, I think I would say reminded me or informed me of just how dangerous the ocean is and what it's like living on there, and it was terrifying thinking about it, to be honest.
Oh.
I feel like that's information that is hidden from the public, so that
Yeah,
people will join up on a cruise, whether it's like a cruise ship or the Navy or whatever, and they will be like, "Oh, I'm going to go work on this, ocean freighter. That's a good living. I'll be a fisherman." They don't know. They don't know what
yeah.
they're getting into, and I think
No, thank you.
that's the big secret, like, because once you're on the ship, there's no turning back.
So I'm a freshwater girl. I hate the ocean. There's just I don't know what it is. I don't like going. I hate salt water. I hate everything that lives in salt water. I just no. So I enjoy a small boat on a lake that I can control.
I'll canoe all fucking day. Yeah, I'm with it, but no, get me off the fucking open ocean. Fuck that noise.
Welcome to the It's a Mimic podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome back to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get. Today we're continuing our discussion on DM tips in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm Adam, and with me today are Terry and Megan, and this episode is called Vehicles, Tackling a Stern Look at Mast-ering Ships. I really fucking worked for that one.
In this episode of the It's a Mimic podcast, this panel of dungeon masters will be discussing the aircraft and watercraft in D&D and how to enhance them.
So before we set sail on this topic, I want to ask, let's just get into it. Are you more comfortable with airplanes or are you more comfortable with ships?
First of all, I just want to ask, was the first half of that sentence some sort of weird British accent and then you switched? Because you switched the accent halfway through that. Adam, did you pick up on that or was that just
100%. I did it. Before we set sail. Yeah.
Before we
Yeah.
set sail. You know what? You're welcome. That's for the world to hear. That's for everybody.
God.
It's a gift.
I sympathize with trying not to impersonate other people's accents because I know how annoying it is when people try to impersonate mine. And
I'm glad that I kicked this off with annoying the shit out of you. So happy about it.
Hold on, I got to hear Terry's Canadian accent now.
Yeah, throw it down. Gotta balance it out.
oh well, I always say that British people speak right from the front of their mouth, from their teeth like this, whereas like Canada's like it's like back. It's at the back of the mouth right here. It's really oh yeah. We don't make those sounds. Everything is from the front with us.
So good. Anyways, are you more comfortable with planes or are you more comfortable with ships?
Let's roll initiative.
Sure.
Oh,
I got a 9.
12.
7.
All right, Megan, answer your own question.
I hate airplanes. I hate being in the air. I don't think we belong there. It's not my thing. And so I do prefer the water vessel and going along water because at least if I fall in the water, I know I can swim. If I fall out of an airplane, I cannot fly.
You know what the sky doesn't have? Sharks.
It's got seagulls though.
No, the problem is Adam is it doesn't have anything, and that's why you fall to the floor.
But you see, the difference is if I'm treading water and if I fall off of a boat and I am away from the boat, I will just sit there and slowly become colder and colder and more exhausted. And as the enemy starts circling, that it's a long, drawn out, horrible death. But if I fall out of a plane, I don't got to worry about that for a couple minutes, and then it's not my problem anymore. So no, and besides, I think planes are way more comfortable than ships. I don't get airsick. I'm afraid I might get seasick. I've never been on a big like ocean faring vessel of any kind, but like I'm far more comfortable. I sleep on planes. That's easy. I have no problem with that. I know what to expect in an airplane. Ships have fucking Poseidon underneath them. Fuck that noise.
Yeah, I think overall I'm going to have to choose planes. Ships might be nice to go on as just an experience sometimes, and probably not even really. But I just also want to make the point that I still fucking hate planes. I still hate planes. And I think I just mean commercial planes, really. I think my dream job all the way through growing up and still is to be a fighter pilot. I'm a Top Gun kid. Like that is my dream that I never realized. And but commercial planes, fuck that. Like it makes people crazy who I don't think are usually crazy. I just think lack of sleep and not eating, no coffee or awake too long, and this weird cocktail of all that, the air just makes people go insane. And I fucking hate flying for that because I have to go back to the UK sometimes, and that flight kills me every time.
No, I think that you're almost right. I think that the people are crazy, but they're just good at hiding it. And then just like travel wears you out so much, it stresses you out so much, you can't hide it. The filter goes away.
I was wanting to lean on the side that they're not, they're just having a really bad time and they just got crazy, and you get and they just happen to be trapped in an area with everyone else. And it's like it could be any of us at any time, to be honest. So I try and sympathize with them.
All right. Well, before we cast off any further, let's check out an info break.
We've previously covered quite a bit in our discussion on Dungeon Master tips in 5th edition. For all those episodes and more, you can follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and dozens of other podcast apps. If you'd like to support us, you can donate through the website, check out our store, or join our Patreon and get access to other episodes and series. If you'd like to pay for some ad space on It's a Mimic, or just send a shout out to a friend, please reach out to us through our email and website that are listed in the show notes below.
Hey, this is Adam with a quick reminder to check out our Patreon if you haven't already. All patrons do get access to the Patreon-only Discord, but the real gem, of course, is the additional bonus episodes that you'll get. For Copper Wormling tier patrons, there are all of the Campaign Builder episodes, including all of Tier 2 and Tier 3 of play, and of course we're launching into Tier 4 pretty quickly. There's also 7 bonus episodes that Dan and I had recorded way back in the day that never got an official edit or release, and they're a part of this conversation as well. For Bronze Young patrons, there are not just the Legend Lore episodes that go into the backlog of 5th edition, but there are also some episodes about other tabletop role-playing games, and the Legend Lore online series, which breaks down all of the D&D Beyond and online material for 5th edition that has been released by Wizards of the Coast. And then, of course, you also get access to the Campaign Builder episodes. For Silver and Adult tier, you get access to all of that, but also bonus episodes that have been released as supplements to regular episodes or are just sidebar bonus rants. And the Homebrew series, where I sit down and talk about how I handle different aspects of 5th edition in unique and interesting ways at my own table. There's also the Gold Ancient tier, which gives you access to all of that stuff, as well as input on topics in some future episodes, as well as a quarterly special episode featuring at least one host dedicated to answering any specific questions that you have about D&D, so it's kind of like a personal mailbag. And then, of course, there's a Metallic Great Worm, which you guys hear all of the time, where there's a Zoom call with at least one host that's going to be recorded and released as a bonus episode every handful of months. So for those of you who haven't checked out the Patreon or you're not quite sure if it's for you, I hope this breakdown helps a little bit, and I look forward to chatting with you guys at the very least in the comments on the public forum. Anyway, let's get back to the episode. So today we're talking about the vehicles. We've done an episode on land vehicles, so we're talking about all of the other vehicles. Megan, why are you breakdancing? What the hell?
Sorry, I'm house sitting Steve's cat.
Oh.
He's a fucking menace. Like Steve, I love you. Robbie, I love you. But I just want to kick this cat.
All right. Well, today we're talking about all of the other ships, both seafaring and airships and some spelljammer ships we'll touch on very briefly. But I just wanted to get into the idea right off the bat that there are a handful of siege weapons that are listed on page 255 and of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it is important that we know that because these siege weapons are meant to be attached to ships as well, and there's some very basic numbers for some ships on page 119, but that's just the beginning of what we have for ships. So you want to go to Ghosts of Saltmarsh for the real information, or if you're going spelljamming, you go clearly to Spelljammer. I don't recommend it. I don't think the price tag is worth it, but if you are determined to do it, then that's where you find the info. But when you want all the really cool shit to deck out a spelljamming ship beyond just what they give you, then Ghosts of Saltmarsh has it. So when we're talking about ships, we got to look at what we have given to us in the book, and what they give us is like just a general idea of what we can expect based on a stat block and a couple of very, very small like notes that were given. So we start off at the very beginning with the idea of the description that's given. I'm going to use the galley for all of my examples today because it's the first one provided in Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and it's probably the one that most people are going to experience outside of a rowboat, right? That's just a decently large ship that can take passengers. So galleys are long vessels that rely on sails and sizable rowing crews to move. These ships can carry siege weapons and soldiers to war or transport large amounts of cargo for merchants. No matter the ship's purpose, the crew almost always hires extra protection since galleys make large cargo-rich targets for pirates. A galley has the following features. The ceiling of the galley's lower deck is 8 feet high. Hanging lanterns cast bright light throughout the ship. Rigging on the ship can be climbed without an ability check. And the galley has one 120-foot-tall mast with sails to catch the wind and oars on the lower deck for rowing the vessel. Now, that's all the information. That's the entire description that we get. I just read it verbatim out of the book. And that's all of it. We don't get anything more about whether there are any specific kinds of flags that are flown, or where's the steering wheel for it? Like how do you captain the ship? Are there crew cabins underneath? Like we don't get any of this information in Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which feels like a real pain in the ass. We do get a map but it's just kind of 2 levels of the most simplistic ship possible. And it's just two decks, one with the whole bunch of siege weapons on the top and one with a bunch of benches down below for what you can assume are essentially slaves, probably rowing, with a bunch of cargo in the bow and in the stern, in the cargo hold below decks. So there's not a whole lot going on here. The idea of there being officers and stuff, it's going to be a miserable fucking time on this ship, and I feel like it's a little too simplistic. But it does give us a good example of what to expect when we get into the actual stat block, because it's got a little bit of everything for the stat block. So first of all, we get the size. Most ships are going to be large size if they're like a rowboat, all the way up to gargantuan like a galley. You get how much space as well, and that gives you kind of the dimensions of it. For example, it says it's a gargantuan vehicle that's 130 feet by 20 feet. That's really interesting. It's weird that they will give it to us for ships, but not for fucking monsters. It'd be nice to have the idea of like how big an actual fucking dragon is instead of just gargantuan size. It could be anything. So we get the capacity, which is 80 crew. This is a creature capacity. And so you're supposed to think medium-sized creatures and like humanoids specifically. So 80 crew, 40 passengers, and then the cargo capacity you're given as well, which is given in tons. You also get a travel pace per hour and per day, but per round is also going to be in the stat block when you get into how quickly it can move, when you get into the actual movement stats later on. There are no mental stats, but there are stats for strength, dex, and con, because the ship does move and it is going to be able to weather a certain amount of damage, right? Or run into things or push them away. So strength, dex, con, the physical stats we get, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are just zeroed out. Vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities are all listed. It's exactly the kind of shit that you would expect for immunities like poison and psychic, or it can't be blinded because it doesn't have fucking eyes, or petrified because it doesn't move on its own, right? As far as resistances and vulnerabilities, there's nothing listed for the galley. I think when you get into some of the spell jamming stuff that's kind of like half alive, you might get some of this. But for your actions, this is the part of the stat block that tells you how many actions that the ship can take. The galley, for example, says that on its turn, it can take 3 actions, choosing from the options below. It can only take 2 actions if it has fewer than half of the crew, and only 1 action if it has fewer than a quarter of the crew. It can't take these actions if it has fewer than 3 crew. So the 3 actions that it have is fire the ballistas. So there are 4 ballistas on this. The galley can fire all of them in a turn. The next action is fire mangonels. The galley can fire its mangonels. And for mangonels, I want you to picture catapults that are just affixed and can like rotate. And then the last one is move. The galley can use its helm to move with its oars or sails as part of the move. As part of the move, it can also use its naval ram. So there are a bunch of different weapons that we have and a bunch of different movement options, and that's about it. So when we get into the components themselves, these are going to tell us the abilities and what we can expect with these different aspects of the ship. For example, the hull. This is the body of the ship. And all the other components need to be attached to the hull. You're going to have an AC and some hit points, but you also get a damage threshold. So a damage threshold, for anybody that needs a refresher, is the amount of damage that the ship is immune to up to and including this number on each attack. So, and that's the important part, is on each attack. For example, the galley has 500 hit points, but its damage threshold is 20. So if you attack it, you do 18 damage, nothing happens. If you do 21, you take 1 damage. And that's true of every round. It's not like you have to pass that 20 once and then you've broken into the ship and you can start doing regular damage. It's not like that. It's every round you have to be doing more than 20 damage in order to actually hurt it. Then we have the control, and most ships have a control that is just simply called the helm. This has a AC and some hit points again, but what it says underneath it is that you can move up to the speed of one of the ship's movement components with one 90-degree turn. If the helm is destroyed, the galley can't turn. So this helm also controls the rudder and the ability to change the direction of the ship. For the movement components, you have on a galley both oars and sails. They have an AC, they have hit points, and they also have a speed, but not just a speed, but also maneuverability. So things like the sails. While sailing into the wind, you can move 15 feet. You normally go 35 feet, or you can go 50 feet while sailing with the wind. It's little things like that. So when we get to the final part, that's the weapons. And this is, I think, the part that everyone's most excited about when it comes to ships, is we get AC, we get HP, and we get the fact that these are meant to be used in combat. These are your weapon attacks. So usually you have ballistas on ships. We have that instead of cannons. Sometimes on mangonels, we'll get mangonels on larger ships like we do with the galley, but those tend to be for big gargantuan ships. You're not going to get it on even a huge ship. That's probably just going to have a single ballista. Interestingly, in the description for a galley's crew, it lists siege engineers, and this is the only stat block to get that. So I assume that that's for the mangonels. So you would think about kind of how your breakdown is, and we're going to get into crew a little bit later, but we do know that for a galley, we've got 1 captain, and it says you're supposed to use a bandit captain for this, 5 other officers, and it lists them out, and they're all supposed to use scout stat blocks, 42 sailors, which are supposed to be commoners, 12 siege engineers, which you use the guards for, and then 20 guards themselves. And then whatever else you want for passengers beyond that. And that's what we have for all of the different kinds of ships. I just use galley, but I believe in Ghost of Saltmarsh there are 5 or 6 different ships, and each one of them is, I guess, a little bit different from the next, but mostly just in size and how many passengers they can take and how many weapons are aboard. So when we then turn to the concept of other ships, we got to start looking at things like airships. This is the big one. We're not really going to touch on the lightning rails of Eberron because we did that in the Eberron episode. But I do want to talk about the elemental airships from Eberron. And these are airships that fly because there's a special lighter than air wood that has been used for its hull. and there's an elemental that has been imprisoned within it, and it's a pilot that's forcing it to do their bidding. Apparently, this is not a pleasant experience for the elemental, and it's akin to imprisonment and forced labor. There are some interesting details and information about how it works on pages 233 and 234 of Rising from the Last War, but it essentially boils down to two things. There's a vertical ring around the ship that has an invisible elemental matrix around the center of the vessel, and only a person with a specific dragon mark can easily command the elemental. Interestingly enough, it doesn't have to be an air elemental. You could use a fire elemental too, and that would make it look and move differently with more flames coming off of it, as opposed to being guided through and whooshing through the air. There are also elemental water vessels as well, and they use water elementals to expertly navigate the seas of Eberron, and they'll be able to go faster and be maneuvered better than the standard ships like I just described. But if we want something a little bit weirder, we can go to Acquisitions Incorporated for a couple of options. One of them is simply called the Battle Balloon. And this is the most unassuming name ever, but there's a bunch of lore and details about it. It's essentially an 80-foot long, 20-foot wide galleon with a colossal hot air balloon on the top and skis on the bottom so it can land. It has a propeller to help move it around, harpoon guns, and a magical arbalester that's like a ballista that does piercing and fire damage, but also does splash damage to the area around the target that it hits. So it's a fucking tank that flies. Again, on top of that, we then have what's called the Mechanical Beholder from Acquisitions Incorporated, which is a floating, huge-sized mechanical steampunk-looking beholder with a room for a pilot that looks out the main eye and like 3 passengers. It has a magical propulsion device, so it just flies because it can, and 3 eye rays that it can all shoot on each turn. There's the disintegration ray, which does force damage, the enervation ray, which does necrotic, and the paralyzing ray, which paralyzes. But if that's not enough and you want something else, then you have to go to Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which is no longer in print, but it had some pretty simple information on astral skiffs and astral brigs, which are the 2 kinds of Githyanki vehicles that were given. All of this information has been lost during the conversion to Monsters of the Multiverse. These details would have been nice to have, but you're probably just as far ahead using the Spelljammer layouts and details, or just making a warship fly, because that's kind of what they give you if you want to go to the astral plane and deal with Githyanki. So I guess that brings us to spelljamming ships. And these are essentially just the same thing, with different options for hulls, weapons, helms, and other details. They're more or less the same as each other, except for their shapes and specific little details. Otherwise, the only notable details are the gravity manipulation that they have and the envelopes of air that surround the ships and let people breathe in the astral plane. And that's what we have for all of the different kinds of ships and crafts for both air and sea, and I guess space as well, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Megan, Terry, you're the one that's been looking at crew, I believe, right?
We're just waiting for you to take a breath, Adam.
Yeah, we're waiting for the pause, dude. Yeah, that's right. I'm looking at crew. All right, team. Okay, so I'll take a look at crew then. And really, there's 2 different types of crew. You have the officers, and then you have the crew itself. And when it comes to officers, I feel like these are the people that would be your named NPCs. Sometimes it's difficult with NPCs when you're trying to figure out who to make an important person, or how to make someone important, or how to invite the party to engage with somebody. And I think you can explore your role play and your NPCs by using these officers as your named NPCs. But anyway, there are a few different types. You would have a captain. So this would be obviously the person who issues orders. And if you want a good captain, you probably have somebody who has high intelligence and charisma scores, because persuasion and intimidation, as well as they would need proficiency with water vehicles, and probably, intimidation and persuasion would be what we would be leaning into for abilities. Next, you might have a first mate. So this is the specialist that keeps the crew's morale high, and essentially is the person that supervises the operations of the vehicle, provides encouragement, and would probably handle discipline as well. So a first mate benefits from having high charisma, again, intimidation, persuasion, as well as proficiency with intimidation and persuasion as well. Next, you would have a bosun. This would be the person that provides the technical advice to the captain and the crew, and leads repair and maintenance efforts. So a good bosun is going to be high strength score, as well as proficiency, probably in carpenter's tools and maybe athletics as well. Quartermaster plots the ship's course, relying on the knowledge of nautical charts and studies the weather and the sea conditions. So if you want a reliable quartermaster, you need somebody who would have a high wisdom score, and then proficiencies would be navigator's tools and the nature skill. Ship's surgeon tends to the injuries, keeps illnesses from spreading throughout the ship, and oversees sanitation. A good surgeon would be somebody who would benefit from a high intelligence score, as well as probably proficiency with herbalism kits and the medicine skill. I feel like a surgeon would be, I could make a good surgeon NPC. That is a NPC that is asking to be interesting, I think. Finally, a cook. A ship's cook works for with the limited ingredients that are aboard the ship to make the meals, and the skilled cook keeps the crew's morale in top shape. We were talking to Robert the other day, who said just as much. He said most of the time crew's going to get excited by good food, while a poor cook would drag down the entire crew's performance. A talented cook would have a high constitution score, as well as probably proficiency with, say, brewer's tools and cooking utensils as well. So that would be it for the officers. Coming into the crew members then, a typical crew member would just use a commoner stat block from the monster manual. That kind of makes them disposable and easy to deal with in situations where a few of them might get killed. They're kind of like the good minions, I suppose. But there are a few optional rules to do with loyalty and quality. So when you're dealing with an individual member of the crew, you would probably find it useful to use the optional loyalty rule. That's going to be in Chapter 4, Dungeon Master's Guide. To convert a quality score into an individual's loyalty score, you add 10 to the crew's quality score. In such a situation where you would have a mutiny, so a poorly led or mistreated crew might end up turning against this officer. So once per day, if a crew's quality score is lower than 0, the captain makes a charisma, intimidation, or persuasion check modified by the crew's quality score. If the check total is between 1 to 9, and the crew's quality score will decrease by 1. If the check is ever 0 or lower, the crew mutinies, which means they become hostile towards the officers, so they might attempt to kill them, imprison them, or throw them overboard. I feel like this is just an excuse for a good scene in your campaign. Okay, finally, shore leave. So we know that life aboard a ship is probably going to be constant wear on the crew, and so spending time in port is going to allow the crew to relax and regain its composure. So if a crew's quality score is 3 or lower, the score increases by 1 for each day the crew spends in port or ashore. So I guess that means then if the quality score is already 4 or higher, they don't gain any bonus from this from being ashore. And that's it. That's officers and crew.
I guess not, which seems a little strange, but I mean, I guess that just keeps you from just jacking up the quality score over and over and over again just by doing nothing.
You're supposed to be on the water or in the air.
Yeah.
Like, get out of town.
All right, so that brings us to Megan.
Yes, I'm going to chat a little bit about combat and how ships fight other ships or how ships fight other things. So when talking about combat, of course, we visit the Saltmarsh book for deets, is what we're talking about today. So that's kind of what the details I'm going to pull from here. So lo and behold, when you fight a ship, you roll for initiative. So this is based on the ship's dex plus the crew's quality score. So that's why it's a good reason to keep that up. Then on the ship's turn, the captain is the one who basically chooses which action to take. And there are 2 main actions a ship can take. One is called take aim, and the other one is called full speed ahead. So any one of the captain, first mate, the bosun, or I guess any of the officers, I'm assuming, are the ones that can kind of call these actions out, but technically the captain is the one who should choose. But I don't know, I feel like there's some open-endedness in terms of who knows the ships the best sometimes. So I'd give some
probably not the
freedom
cook, though,
for your
right?
DMaged. No, that's what I say. It's mostly just they list mostly all the officer options in terms of folks who can call out orders. But when it comes to the 2 actions, take aim is, as it sounds, the captain or one of the officers can order someone to man or utilize one of the ship's weapons as long as they're within 10 feet of it. And this gains them advantage with that attack when it goes off. The other is full speed ahead, which basically means that the captain will order the crew to work harder to propel the ship forward into like a faster movement, obviously. So it is a D6 roll that you multiply by 5, and that is applied to a bonus of the ship's speed. It is noted that you cannot stack the bonuses, so you have to recall the order to be able to re-up that bonus. But you can roll for another attempt as another action, and if you take, you would just take that higher number. So if you roll a shitty number, you could just call another action to try again, basically. You just choose the higher number that you roll. When we talk specifically about the crew in this instance, the book kind of recommends not getting too deep into the nitty-gritty details past officers, like kind of how Terry spoke to how naming your NPCs for your officers is a really good idea, but the crew, it's kind of like given a professional courtesy that your ship is well manned, unless you want to get overly complex. So I feel like ship battle can be as easy or as complex as you decide to make it in terms of navigating, having a fully manned ship, right? Again, as I mentioned, it can kind of add confusion, but something that the book does mention to help kind of add to limiting the confusion of casualties is it does outline a few tips and tricks, such as like what can happen if someone casts a fireball spell or does an AoE or something like that, in terms of just doing simple things like roll a d6 for whatever level the spell is. And then that's how many were caught in the blast kind of thing. So there are ways to kind of navigate group battle, which I think is a good thing to bring into when you're doing ship navigation. But yeah, honestly, that's the nitty gritty of ship battle. It's not as complex as a lot of people think it is, probably until you get into having to do it. So I can see it getting a little too convoluted and a little too overwhelming sometimes for some people to try and keep track of all the things that are going on. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I guess the last thing that I kind of skipped over before, I did mention that the galley had like a naval ram, which, essentially lets you run into other ships to do damage. Of course, the naval ram itself is just a giant ass piece of wood that's on the very front of the boat that, you're supposed to drive your boat into another one. It has damage reduction as well given to it, but there's also like 4 pages later, it doesn't actually list any of the damage that it would do until you get to the crashing a ship part of the book, which is like 5 pages away, and you can do up to like it's a gargantuan ship. You do 16 d10 bludgeoning damage.
Yeah,
but it's wild
to a singular person.
Well, but yeah, or an object, or I mean, it's a good way to do a bunch of damage to a kraken or a dragon turtle, right? So, but they will have to make any creature struck by a ship has to make a dexterity save equals 10 plus the ship's strength modifier, and then it takes the damage based on the crash damage. So it goes from 1d6 if you're in a small size ship, and I mean, we don't really get any small size ships or even medium sized ships listed out, but it's nice to have them because I mean, if you've got sprites going to war in little fucking pixie cups, then this is what they would do, right? So which is cute and funny. They'll do 1d6 damage and all the way up to gargantuan, which is 16d10, so it scales pretty rapidly. But anyway, that's all that we have really for this part of the conversation. Let's roll dice. I would like to get into initiative to have questions. I got a natural 20.
You bitch, I got a 19.
15.
Last with a 15 kind of hurts, hey? So, all right. The first question is, how do we feel about the options for seafaring vessels in 5th edition? This is good enough to get started, I guess. I'm going to want to put special things on my ships. I'm going to want to detail out where the cargo netting is for people to climb, and we don't have any of that in the maps of the ships that are given. It's neat to have this information about crew, but the fact that the galley included additional crew that's not even listed in the regular crew means that, this feels like it wasn't completely thought all the way through before they made it, and they just kind of went broad. So it's a jumping off point, I would say.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this is somebody's project that fell on their desk at the last minute, and they're like, crap, we have to figure out how to make boats work. And like,
I gotta do that right after this. So what you're talking about.
But yeah, but to your point, Adam, I think it's a great starting off point. I think that like I do enjoy the more flavorful boats, like the elemental ones that you were talking about, in terms of I like the fact that they are specifically built for a certain type of area to traverse in. Like airships obviously are built from a wood that can travel through air, and water ships have water elementals that help them, right?
Yeah.
But I also feel like that's going to be a big piece of how your world is created in terms of who has the money to fucking do that. So I feel like those ships would belong to to the ones that are going to be the hardest to be a part of or be on. So you're going to be on the shitty ships while the good ships are floating around you, kind of thing. So, but I think they're really good and very flavorful, and I think that was a little bit of fun. But yeah, I think it was a little very base and very broad, but you can customize it, and we kind of like doing that as DMs anyways. So
Yeah.
You know what? I don't mind it. I don't mind it because it's simple enough that we can move quickly on it, which means when you can move quickly when you're DMing, you can make it exciting. So if we want to get moving with these ships, if you want to have a little ship battle, multiple ships, it's simple enough that the rules are easy to pick up for the players to know what they want to do, fire their ballistas and their other weapons, which means you can move quickly on it, so you keep it exciting. So I don't mind it. I don't want it to be too complicated because then I got to slow everything down. So I don't mind it.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's kind of like, even the book suggests, don't get too complicated, don't have too many people that you're keeping track of. It's groups of people. Don't go too full bore. Like,
honestly,
just
even with the crew, if I was going to go into a battle with one, just based on how it favors the officers to the crew, I would probably just theater the mind the crew all the way through the battle, and I'd just be like, 12 of them died, 7 of them died, and if they're like, even if they wanted to engage with them, if they're like, is there anyone around? I'd be like, yeah, there's 5 people around you in the area. Just keep it easy for the crew, get through the battle, and then be like, yeah, there's 32 of them left or something.
roll some dice of how many are alive. Yeah. Right.
Just keep it moving quick. So that's what I like about these ship rules.
Yeah.
Do you guys like the crew options? Like, I feel like we're missing people out of the crew, but again, it depends on how long I'm spending on the ship, right?
Yeah.
My base knowledge for crew members on ship vessels is very strictly on that reality TV series about what is it? Was it like, I don't know what it's called, but fuck.
It's about ships.
Yeah, it's about crew, like the mini cruise ships and sail ships, but it's about rich people and they take them, and then it's about the crews that man those ships. So all they really have is a bosun, a captain, and then like the people that clean the ship, basically, and that's it.
Reality TV is just rich people in different places. This is rich people on ships.
You know what? I love that kind of TV, okay?
I really thought you were going to say, yeah, the reality TV show Gilligan's Island. I was going to have words with you, Megan.
You know what? I've never seen Gilligan's Island. I know the theme song because it always came on when I was a kid, but I've never actually watched Gilligan's Island.
Really? You should watch one episode and then you've seen them all.
Great.
Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts about the combat rules for ships? Again, I can work with this. I will do other things. I'm sure it works against other ships. I would be curious to see how it's going to fare against a Kraken that has legendary actions and shit as well. Like, it's good. You're going to sink some fucking ships, right? Like, it's hardy enough for ship combat, not hardy enough for some of the big creatures out there. I can see why dragon turtles and leviathans are so fucking scary.
Yeah. No, I think, again, I like how basic and simple they are. It'll get you going, it'll get you started. It keeps battle moving and keeps the battle focused on your players actually navigating the battle as opposed to the ship itself. I can't remember if it was in one of our campaigns or in another one that I played in where we did the you can repair the ship during battle rule, where you can spend certain amounts of points or certain amount of actions to actually have a group of people repair holes in the ship, and then it would take a certain amount of like turns. I don't know if that might not, if you're silent, Adam, it's not on what the campaign I did with you, but
no, we always had Dan casting mending.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no, we actually added a mechanic where one of the actions could be that you could have people go and repair the ship, but you were risking people's lives because either it was filling with water or it was a firing zone, right? So, but repairing the ship would increase your quality score, and then that would keep your ship going, kind of thing. So
I guess that's the other thing to point out too, is, I mean, you're on a ship, it's fully manned, and you set sail, you go out into the open water, you end up in a combat or two, you take a bunch of damage. And so the thing is, while yes, you've got the hull and the weapons and everything else that have hit points and AC, and you're managing that, as a dungeon master, I should also be managing like the unnamed crew that are dying or getting tossed overboard, because that's going to really affect the speed if I'm relying on oars or if I'm relying on specific kinds of movement. Will we be able to actually man enough of the weapons to defend ourselves in the future? And that could be a big plot hook, right? Like, we lost over half of the crew. We are adrift, and we don't have the people that can repair the ship anymore. They all died. Now what? So I know it's been a while, but I've done a lot of aquatic play with both of you guys in the past in D&D. So what's something we did with our ships that might inspire others? Do you guys have any thoughts? I'm going to hold my action on this one because it's really a question for you two.
Who's first? Megan? Me?
Yeah.
What's something that we did well?
Yeah.
I think that with like that you customize random encounters for ships when we did it. So like we would run into sharks, we would run into sirens, we'd have to navigate still having a watch overnight because things were still going around us, right? Just because we were on a ship and not wandering through a forest, we maintained that things can happen at any time. It's just a different type of danger, but it's still danger, right? So
did it feel appropriately aquatic and naval, or was it all just random shit that could happen to other places?
No, it was it was customized. Like we had like the biggest battle I remember was the sharks, when we all ended up in the water and having to navigate sharks being around us, right? And then in the nighttime, the sirens calling to you, right? Like you're not going to get that in the middle of a forest. So so I think that the ability to customize it to the fact that yes, you are on the water makes more sense. I think we also had people like merfolk swim by every once in a while. That a random encounter of them just swimming by and waving was one of our random encounters. Like we didn't fight them, we just waved at them and they went on their way. You know what I mean? So it's like re-emphasizing that you were on the water. So,
yeah. I think it was the variety of the encounters, right, that brought that part of the world to life, interacting with different types of encounters, and that's really how you make it interesting. Is for naval campaigns is to just thread those encounters to bring it to life. Doesn't always need to be a combat. It can be a role play. It can be a pleasant encounter like the merfolk waving at you, but just thread those encounters and then build and then shape those encounters around the mechanics, right? We talk about quality of crew, we talk about morale as well. So that use that to thread the encounters to build on what I enjoyed, what Adam did, which is the variety encounters, because then the sentiment from the crew or how they interact with your PCs will change based on that quality score, and each one of those encounters is going to challenge that crew quality score. So I loved what Adam did with a variety of the encounters, and now it makes me think how I'll tie that to these newer mechanics that I'm getting used to.
Yeah, I really wanted to focus on the exploration and the role playing. When I knew that we were going to be doing a big water campaign, I knew that it couldn't just be combat, because you're essentially stuck in what broke down to be 1 to 3 rooms all of the time, right? And whether that room was just like the outer deck or the cargo hold or the mess hall inside, like whatever it was, because you guys were on a pretty big ship. So there were some things. So you guys went up, you had a random encounter with a dryad, but I made them a water nymph that was on just a rock in the middle of the water that had no business being there. Why is there a fucking rock here, and why is she standing on top of it? And while she was all sorts of like full of charms and trying to seduce all of the men to come into the water, she also reached out and touched the ship, and it turned all of the wood back alive, and it immediately started to produce fruit. And you guys just had a bunch of food growing off one half of the ship for a while, which means that I didn't have to worry about rations and shit in the cargo hold anymore. That was very much a logistics decision by me ahead of time, but I wanted to mix it up with something magical and kind of fun. So I guess that's my big note for people is remember that you are in Dungeons and Dragons. And so, I mean, Megan, in the campaign we're in now, you guys had cloud giants just freaking hovering above the water that grabbed the ship and stopped it in its tracks to say, hey, what are you doing here? Right? Instead of them floating or swimming or being on a giant sized ship, but they can turn the bottom halves into mist and they can fly around like a genie. And so they fucking did. And it was magical. And we deal with magic in the forest with fae and shit all the time. We deal with all sorts of wild monsters in dungeons and underground and the Underdark. But there's got to be magic. There's got to be wonder and splendor on the ocean or in the air as well. Do you guys have any tips or tricks for other DMs on how to utilize watercraft at all? Or do you think that we've pretty much covered it with what they've got for us here?
I think it's pretty well covered. I mean, at the end of the day, it goes back to what we originally said in the terms of it's very base. So feel free to get creative with what you're going to do, but don't go too far because it can get way too convoluted, way too fast, and way too complicated, way too fast. And the whole point is to make it more focused on your players, not focused on your little ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, right? Just to get to the fun bit, and the fun bit is how quickly can we determine success or not in everything that the players are trying to do. So just, I think those rules are really streamlined, focus on what's going to be fun, and just keep it moving quickly. And I think this simple rule set, even though, yeah, it's not too detailed, but it allows you to do that in a fairly realistic way where everybody will be on board with it. It's just what's the rules of this naval game? Okay, at least the bad guys are following the same rules. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would do specifically with watercraft as opposed to aircraft or even just like vehicles on land, have reasons for people to get thrown overboard, whether it's a raiding party that's tossing them overboard or a rogue wave or a hurricane, whatever. Put people in the fucking water. It splits the party while keeping them together, right? The people in the water can't help the people on the deck, but the people on the deck can help the people in the water. And so it suddenly makes everybody be on the same fucking team. And it can get scary for people in heavy armor that are going to have disadvantage on swim checks and things in order to keep up. So,
or that have metal bones that we had to chain to a mast in hopes that they would not fall into the water.
I forgot we did that. Yeah. Do you guys have much experience on aircraft in D&D?
Not really, to be honest with you. Like the closest I got was we picked a water vessel out of the water and put it in the sky. That was the closest.
You guys have had a hot air balloon, but we haven't really used it in like anything in the air. It was just like hover 100 feet above the ground and go faster, right?
It was our fast travel. It was like, that's what I mean. So I feel like anytime I've been in an air vessel, it's been a fast travel. Even when we lifted the boat out of the water, put it in the air, it was to fast travel us. So I've spent more time in watercrafts than aircrafts in a more meaningful way.
Terry?
Not really, but I went from 0 to 100 with mine. My party fought a bunch of cloud giants and stole their flying castle, and I just treated it like a massive ship. It had ballistas. I let them fire all of the weapons on a turn because there's crew, there's forces, there's people yelling orders. So you get to use the weapons on the turn, and essentially made the biggest fucking warship for them ever so that they could explore this world. And what did they do? The first session they got it, they deliberately crashed it into the ground and fucking destroyed it. And they had no good reason other than where they needed to be on the ground. So they just fucking crashed it and killed all of the remaining bad guys inside. What's the point? Why do I put this effort in?
Oh, players. You say that like you haven't done shit like that to me. Like where you haven't just like with a magic item I forgot to add one sentence on the end of, you turned an entire army of giants to go walk to their death in a desert.
Oh, honestly, I thought that encounter was the first perfect time to do that. And I thought that's what you wanted me to do. Not what you wanted me to do, but what you'd invited me to do.
I totally had, but because I hadn't written that last line about you can use this once per day, you just fucking abused the shit out of it. And off they went. Yeah. Is there anything that you guys would like to see in dealing with aircrafts in 5th edition, considering that we don't have a whole lot of experience with it? I haven't really done it since 3.5 in Eberron, right? And even then it was an excuse to just crash an airship. So apparently that's a common theme with D&D. But like, is there anything that you would want out of an airship series of encounters or an airship portion of a campaign? Or does it not interest you at all?
I'm not interested. It's just that I think it's like simple enough. Okay, I get it. I'll do it sometimes, but I don't know. I'm more excited by the watercraft, I think.
I feel like there's more dangers on the water than there is in the sky. And don't get me wrong, in D&D, that's a completely wrong sentence to use because we have every kind of animal in this world flies in D&D. However, you're not their prey, right? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a different feel.
That's it. But I think you can be more creative with the encounters on the water. In the air, it's like we talked about a bunch of different types of encounters that Adam had done before. But in the air, it's like, here's another flying thing. It's eagles. Okay, here's a wyvern. Careful. Like it's the same thing. It's you just see another flying thing.
Yeah. The flying thing lands on your deck and fight it, right? This is why, like, my big thing is if you're going to get on an airship, you'd better have exploratory things. You'd better have role-playing opportunities with the crew, because it is going to be the same one or two notes over and over again with combat. And one of those notes is going to be crash the fucking ship.
Yeah.
Eventually you will crash it. I promise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Chekhov's gun for D&D is if you introduce an airship, it will crash into something.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the last portion of the episode where we're going to talk about all of the upgrades that are available in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh. And these are upgrades that are meant for your ship. It's meant originally for watercraft, but there's no reason you can't add this onto your aircraft as well, which would be really fun, some of this. So we're going to go, I kind of separated it up into sections. So let's roll initiative, and we'll just keep that initiative all the way through the whole list.
4.
7.
What'd you get, Megan?
4.
I got a 15. So we're just going in order then. Same as it is on the page. Good for us. So first off, there are some options for weapons, but that's kind of a misnomer. It's actually options for ammunition, right? Because we already know what the weapons are. These are just things that you add to it. So for example, my first one is concussive rounds. And these are meant to be magical ammunition that are fired from any weapon on a ship and are supposed to startle and disorient people. The only mechanic we get for them, though, is that this will slow a vehicle's speed by 2d10 feet until the start of the attacker's next turn, which I guess is done by distracting the captain or pilot of the ship, but that's not stated anywhere.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I will take the next one, which is arcane artillery. Sorry, I was thinking of ideas of how to use the concussive round. That's why I was pausing as I was trying to take my mic off mute. Arcane artillery. So using methods similar to those to produce magic weapons. This is where you can have a skilled spellcaster imbue a ship's weapon with some arcane destructive energy. When this happens, that weapon gains +2 bonus to its attack and its damage rolls, and its attack counts as magical now.
I mean,
Nice.
sure, that's good for getting around,
Yeah.
you know.
Magical spaces. Right?
Yeah, all those resistances, right? So I guess.
Well, I've got grasping rounds, which I feel like I was given because this is basically just the ship's version of grapple. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
But
Yeah.
this method is basically a giant grappling hook for boats. It launches chain shots to other vessels or creatures, and it is a DC 14 strength save, or you cannot move, or that they cannot move away from you. So the ship can use an action on its turn to attempt to remove the weapon and free itself. So I like the fact that it's like an attempt to remove itself, but it doesn't give you a roll. But I like the idea that if you wanted to remove the grappling hook from whatever it is, it would have to be a strength on your side to pull it off.
Yeah, fortunately, most ships do have a strength score, so that is a possibility. The last one that we have here is explosive rounds, and these are exactly what they sound like. It's evocation magic that's tied to whatever your attack is, and it just does an additional 2d6 fire damage. None of these really stand out as being amazingly awesome, but you got to remember that you're going to have multiple siege weapons firing these things all at once, and this is going to make a big impact. If you've got 4 ballista that are shooting grasping rounds, 3 of them hit another smaller ship and drag it in, then I mean that's 3 strength saves they've got to succeed on. Like it feels like this could get out of control pretty quickly. And I feel like they're underwhelming because it's going to happen a lot, right? And then we have, interestingly enough, figurehead options. I had the first one, and that's the Guardian figurehead. And this is when the figurehead looks like a giant armored knight. And then once every 24 hours, the ship can turn this massive figurehead into a CR-16 iron golem that acts when the captain uses the ship. So it's only when the captain does, right? So it only lasts for a minute, but an iron golem is going to be pretty fucking effective for that minute.
Yeah.
Just coming alive and fucking up another ship, or you know what? Now it's swimming and it's going to fight the Kraken. So
that's fucking 10 rounds. You can get a lot done in that time.
Yeah.
Okay, I have the red dragon figurehead. So this figurehead depicts a red dragon rearing to strike with its mouth open. And this figurehead, as an action, the ship can activate this item to create a 60-foot cone of flame that originates from the figurehead, probably from its mouth. Each creature or object in that cone then makes a DC 12 dexterity saving throw, taking 66 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. Once the ship uses this action, it can't do it again for 1 minute.
So you get a once a combat, essentially.
It fucking sucks. It needs to be more so that you use it. Make it more exciting, and then they will burn ships, and then that's fun.
Recharge on a 6.
Yeah, sure.
It's something.
Well, recharge on a 6 means you'll see it twice in a combat, right?
Maybe.
Not the way that I roll.
No. All right, I got the Storm Giant figurehead. So this is depicted as a storm giant holding a lightning bolt. So basically Zeus. The ability is basically it grants you a 60-foot cone, which is a DC 12 con save or take 4d6 thunder damage, half on a save. It also pushes anyone who failed the DC back 10 feet. Can only be used once per minute. So basically once per 10 rounds.
Boo.
Yeah.
I think these are all neat enough. My big concern is that they're going to overtake combat, right? Like if you have it too often, then your players aren't doing anything. But if it's not enough, if you don't use it often enough, then why even have it, right? So it's going to be a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially with the one where it's like a cone in front of you, it's like once your enemies or if something that's attacking you has that ability, you're going to learn that that's a thing and you're not going to go in front of that ship anymore. And then they're never going to use it again.
Yeah.
I think I want more because I want them to use it and I want it to be more exciting. And I don't care about these rules are so simple. We should be blasting the shit out of these ships because I feel like I could comfortably control multiple ships in the combat if I just kind of zoom it out. So I just want more. I want them to be able to use it and be excited by it.
Yeah. I'm inspired to come up with other kinds of figureheads too. Like again, if it's a harpy and it's got the siren song, then it can lull other people to, I don't know, half the crew is asleep when you pull up to the enemy ship, right?
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about hull options for a moment. I think we each have two here because there's a lot of them. My first one's pretty easy. It's a reinforced hull, and that means you double the hit points. That's it.
Nice.
That's it.
Love it.
I'm still scrolling to mine in the book, and you're done. Okay, I have the Death Vessel. So crafted with materials harvested from the Shadowfell. This upgrade allows the ship to have an aura of dread. So as an action, the ship can create a pulse effect of essentially horrifying energy, and then every creature that's considered an enemy of the ship who is on board or within 210 feet of it makes DC 14 Wisdom saving throw. They fail. The creature is frightened for 1 minute. On a successful save, the creature is immune to that ability for 24 hours. And then once it's been used, it can't be used again until 1d4 hours have passed.
I mean, sure. Frightened never does what I wanted.
Much.
No, and
Agreed.
it's underwhelming if it doesn't work. So it makes you want to do something else.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I got the Living Vessel, which the ability's not that great, but I think visually it's really cool. Basically, this is a hull made of living plants that live off the water and the sunshine, thought to be crafted by the Feywild. The wood literally bleeds sap if you damage it. The bonuses are +2 to con checks and saves, and as long as the ship has 1 hit point, it gains 10 hit points per minute. So it basically heals itself.
Well, that's actually really useful. So
And visually really appealing in my mind. So
I like that.
Yeah.
My second one is Vigilant Watch, and I'll read it directly out of the book here, just for the description here. A row of crystal orbs, each filled with viscous liquid and a beholder's eyeball, is mounted along the ship's hull. So the idea here is that any invisible creatures within 120 feet are now visible. How much are we running into invisible creatures on the open water that we fucking need this? I mean, like, sure, there's some, but fuck, I'm never going to use this.
Yeah, is it like...
I'm more likely to put this on a spell jamming ship so that it can see cloaked vessels.
Yeah, and it kind of relies on your DM to lean into it as well, right? If you as the DM know they've got that, you're like, okay, so what do we do? Do we even bother sending an invisible creature, or do we just have the invisible creature show up where they can see it? Like, it's just, I don't know. You have to dance with the DM on that one.
I will say this though, I gave you guys heavy mists and fogs around all of the waterways when you guys were doing your entire campaign. Visibility was almost nothing, and so everything, you could hear it before you saw it, and it would show up within 100 meters of your visibility, right? So of your crow's nest. So that means that there was a bunch of shit that was just like 60 feet off the bow by the time you were aware of it. And that was really effective for making a lot of the random encounters an immediate fucking problem. That's what I think Vigilant Watch could be good for as well. If you just have an invisible navy, suddenly they're on top of you over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, my second one is Churning Hull. So essentially a tempest rages within rune-etched iron chains. Raiders and pirates who operate under the blessings of a storm god sometimes make use of this upgrade. By draping the chains over a ship's hull, this allows the storm's fury thrashes into the water around it, and the water within 210 feet of the ship becomes difficult terrain for everything other than this ship. All right, you're slowing everything down that's around you, but it's a pretty good radius, though.
That's an insane radius. That's
Yeah.
great for raiding parties, for keeping them at bay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're taking control of the combat with this one.
Yeah, and I will say it's 120 feet radius, so that's like underneath the ship as well. So nothing's going to come up from underneath and hit you.
Well, it
Quickly.
says within 210 feet of the ship, so
Yeah.
All right, my last one on these ones is the frost-locked hull. So this is basically just an icy ship that is immune to cold damage, vulnerable to fire damage, and can float along ice the same way it would water with no speed disadvantage. So this is an ice ship, and that is all you can use it for.
Oh, it's going to find the Northwest Passage. That's what it's for.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is when you go find your frost giants, Megan.
And you know what? I'm gonna, but I probably won't do it by ship.
Fair. Next up is the different kind of movement upgrades that we have. There are sails and oars. There are again 6 options. I took the oars, so I'm going to start off with the first one, which again, super simple. They're part clockwork, part magical. These are clockwork oars, and it's exactly what it sounds like. All it takes is one person to push a button or pull a lever to get them to start or stop, and then whatever your oar's movement, they just do it. You don't need crew.
okay. Mine is dragon sails. So dragon sails are essentially dragon scales that are woven into the sails to make them resistant to damage. So the sail will gain +3 bonus to AC, and then they have resistance to that damage type based on the skills that are used to craft it. So we have all of the standard dragons, the 5 chromatic and the 5 metallic, and then their damage types.
Would you do this still for like the gem dragons, or if you manage to get like moonstone, like whatever the breath weapon or their element is, you just add this?
Yeah, I got no reason why not. Yeah, I would just do this in.
I feel like you could flavorfully add how they got it or why it's there.
Right,
Like
right.
I would want to know why they have a fucking dragon scale sail.
Yeah.
Like
Or just another ship, someone else's ship that is known to have this ability, some sort of local legendary ship or something, and then that encourages engagement with it.
yeah, like the Black Pearl has a black dragon like sail. No one is going to question that.
Exactly.
But Joe Schmo at the dock has a red dragon scale sail. It's like, what the fuck, dude?
Like, do you feel that they kind of half-assed this one? Stop like weaving dragon scales in
Yeah.
and use a fucking dragon wing.
Yeah, that'd be dope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my last one on this one, my first one on this one is the Defiant sails. So these are basically shiny mithril sails with that glitter and sparkle, and due to that shine, any ranged weapon attack against it, or also anyone on board is done so with advantage, but not an issue once you aboard the ship yourself. So it's not like it affects anyone that is currently on the ship. It is just anyone attacking ranged at the ship.
Well, I like that. That's good, I guess.
Yeah.
Like very circumstantial, but
I feel like the crows would love you though. Like you would just be surrounded by crows and seagulls because of your shiny sails.
Yeah. The other kind of oars that we have here are called the scything oars. And if the ship takes an action to move with these oars, anyone within 10 feet of the exterior of the ship has to make a DC 10 dex save or take 2d6 slashing damage because the oars are as sharp as blades. Sure, I like no comment, no notes. This will fuck up your merfolk, and like,
I would have somebody fall overboard on top of one. Like,
and just get cut to fucking shreds.
yeah, give it that visual.
Considering all of the crew are commoners, right? So
Yeah.
it's
To
not,
shreds, you say?
it's not necessarily fucking the player characters up, but it makes for a horrifying scene if you can fuck up a lot of commoners with this, especially if it's people they're supposed to be keeping alive.
Yeah, turning the Sahuagin Raiders into chum.
Exactly. And we were talking about threading encounters the other day, Adam. What does chum attract? Exactly.
Yeah.
Everfull sails. So these are billowing sails that are woven from cloud stuff drawn from the elemental plane of air. I just want to pause there. Is cloud stuff a real term, or are they being funny by saying cloud stuff? Because it's hyphenated, which makes me think it's a genuine term.
As far as I know, it is them just giving up on trying to describe what clouds are made of.
Right.
I think about it like this, though. cloud giants have castles that live on clouds. Those clouds can't just be made of water vapor. They have to be made of stuff. And I guess cloud stuff is the best we can do for that shit. So here we are now.
So, well, wind whips and whistles around them. This allows the ship to move with a speed of 60 feet, regardless of direction relative to the wind.
Filled with cloud stuff. Fantastic.
Yeah, you can move in the same speed everywhere. Go wherever you want.
Yeah. Oh dear. My one here is the screaming sails. So these sails are infused with the energy of a wraith and a banshee. And that is exactly how it sounds. As an action within 5 feet of the sails, the captain can cause the sails to howl like a banshee. And any creature within 300 feet must make a DC 14 wisdom save or take 4d6 psychic damage and be frightened for 1 minute. Once used, it can't be used for 2d6 hours.
I mean,
So
that's evocative.
Yeah. I feel like I would use this again thematically once as like a big bad thing is coming towards the ship, and then the captain blasts this off to scare it away. And then now you know there's something terrible in the water, but you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you got to get back to port to recharge it, right?
Yeah.
Terry, I just looked up cloud stuff, cloud hyphen stuff. I Googled it, and it just gave me a bunch of fucking cloud storage shit for like OneDrive and Apple support and shit like that. So no, it's nothing. It is nothing.
It is a nothing term.
Yeah.
If you Google cloud, what comes up? Is it cloud stuff like you just talked about? Is it cloud from Final Fantasy VII?
Depends on your search history.
Oh yeah, I guess.
The last one, kind of like the miscellaneous options that we have. There are some like neat bits and pieces here. I had the bones of endless toil, and the ship is covered in the bones of ancient evil creatures and runes that are on the bones and the ship cast an eerie green light. I'm assuming that this is your great old ones, your Cthulhu level of ancient evil creatures, because it's not specified at all, and it sounds crazy. If a creature dies aboard the ship, it must roll a DC 12 wisdom save, and on a success, the creature dies as normal. If they fail, they rise immediately as a zombie and join the crew as an obedient follower of the captain. So the good news is if you succeed, you only get to die. That's the win. Because remember, if you come back as a zombie, you cannot be resurrected.
I do remember that, Adam. Yes, thank you. Now, mine is the smuggler's banner. So this is essentially a flag that's meant to be flown from the ship's mast, and its magic causes it to appear as a flag or a banner displaying the symbol, group, captain, or realm, which would be friendly to the viewer. So multiple viewers might see different flags or crests. So maybe you can trick one person, but a group, eventually they might figure it out. But the banner's true power lies in its ability to aid a ship in making rapid escape. So as an action, the ship and all the friendly creatures aboard it teleport up to 3 miles to a known destination of the captain's choice. So hostile creatures aboard the ship don't move with the ship and fall into the water and then once it's used to teleport, it can't teleport in this way again for 2d6 days.
I don't mind that one. That was pretty cool.
That one's useful, and they're gonna like it. And
yeah.
It's just, but is it gonna just be every time you get into a fight, you teleport away and the bad guys fall into the water?
I mean, it is hilarious until the bad guys figure it out and fuck it up somehow.
Yeah.
Like they attack the banner.
Yeah. All right. My little last one here is the Taskmaster's drums. This is a 4 foot tall. I wrote 4 foot tall drunk, but that's not what this is. This is a 4 foot tall drum with floating metal mallets. As an action, it can be activated and it starts to drum rhythmically for 1 minute. This gives the ship 1 extra action as long as it has 1 to begin with. Once used, you have to wait 2d10 hours to do so again.
Oh, I love anything that's going to add more to the action economy. That's
fun.
All right. So let's grab dice and roll initiative for the last time.
1.
14.
9.
All right. So let's pick a ship, water or air, doesn't matter which, and now add any 3 upgrades to it and give it a name. So you guys made me go first. So I originally wanted to do for like a water vessel, the Sinful Princess or the Rambunctious Barnacle. I thought those would be really fun. but then they didn't kind of line up with what I was looking at for my upgrades. So instead, I'm going to use the fiery dragon, and then I'm going to add the red dragon figurehead, the explosive rounds, and the dragon sails. And I'm going to put it all on an airship. And so people will talk about the fiery dragon, and hopefully my players will assume it's a real dragon until this fucking ship comes out of the flaming clouds above the city and wreaks havoc on the citizens below.
That's awesome. I like that a lot. Very thematic.
You're next, Megan. What do you got?
Awesome. So I'm gonna go with a water vessel that I'm gonna call the Wailing Giant. And this is gonna have the Guardian figurehead, so the iron golem on the front, with the smuggler's banner so that it can wisp out of the way if it wants to, and then with the screaming sails. So you basically hear it coming, and then all of a sudden you'll see from the fog a giant iron golem come through the fog. And I think that would be fucking frightening as shit.
That would be really cool to, like, you come through the fog, you hear the scream, everybody knows the scream is coming, and they assume it's the iron golem because as soon as it gets close, the ship teleports away.
Yeah.
So they just think it's a golem out there.
Exactly. It'd be hilarious.
Okay. I'm gonna go water vessel. Screw it. I want it to be fun, so I'm gonna go warship. Let's do red dragon figurehead because, of course, just for the vision of it. What else do I need? Hull options. What do I like? Churning hulls, tactical, but I don't know if I'd do that. I don't know. What would I name it? I like revenge type names, like where there's a story behind it. I don't have a story, but I call it, like, it's D&D, but I call it like Sophie's Revenge or something. Like, who's Sophie? What happened? There's a story.
Nobody knows who Sophie is.
In the ship names D20 table on page 208, it's got like first word adjective, second word noun, and the second word revenge is one of the options there, Terry, too. So
yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
And then what do I want? Probably scything oars. Yeah, smuggler's banner.
So the smuggler's banner is pretty good, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, we like it.
Yeah. That's cool. So we doubled up on smuggler's banners and the red dragon figurehead. Some of these are neat, but again, I don't know how much I'm going to use them. I would probably be more apt to use these things on ships that are defending themselves from the players than the other way around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, before we head into the grand finale of this episode, let's cut to a quick info break.
If you've been inspired by the conversation in this episode, please feel free to reach out and share your creativity and ideas with us and the rest of the community. You can reach us on Facebook and Instagram or on our subreddit at r/it'samimic. Also, if you're feeling particularly generous, please follow and subscribe and leave us positive reviews, likes, and comments. Engagement like that helps us pop up on search engines and keep this show running.
All right. So we've talked a lot about boats, ships, air vessels, different types of, things that are attached to them and how to operate them. How do we feel about this? I know, Terry, you're doing a campaign right now that's full of,
It full of what ships?
I don't know, my brain
Full of
shut off.
vessels.
It is strange when the cameras are off. I'm better when the cameras are on. I'm
was
talking to them.
Right. I was just listening intently, and my pause was just because I was listening to you. Okay, full of what? It was full of ship.
You've got a lot of ship travel in yours. So
Not
were you
so much
inspired by
anymore.
this?
Yeah, a little bit, not so much anymore. And then I went to air travel. It was supposed to be air travel with the flying castle until they fucking crashed it on day one. Yeah, I've tried to be inspired by this and then use my inspiration, but they won't let me do it. But yeah, I like it. I like it because it's simple, but it's not boring. So it's good.
Yeah. And Adam, do you think that we'll go back to doing more ship travel or air travel?
Yeah, it's likely that we'll revisit it a couple of times, probably more airships than watercraft at this point, because I feel like we've done watercraft to death in this part of the world. So that's a little spoiler for the future of the campaign. But when you get to a certain point in a campaign, you've got to start zooming out on the overland travel. And so you start to rely on things like ships and caravans and airships and whatnot. It's a good, easy way to do that, but then it provides other problems, like how do you keep it from being monotonous or just hand waving? Now you're on the other side of the map. Like there are interesting ways to have random encounters that don't include combat. And so I guess my last detail is one of the things that I've always done in D&D, and I think this was a holdover from a previous edition. I don't know why I do this. I don't know where it comes from, but I'm consistently using sleight of hand checks for tying knots and using ropes. And when you come to ship travel, whether it's air or sea, I'm expecting there to be cargo nets and netting hanging off the side of the ship, or fishing nets, or tons of rigging and ropes and other things. And you're going to take prisoners sometimes. You got to tie them up using ropes. Sleight of hand suddenly becomes far more important. And so I'm going to give a lot of my NPCs some sort of proficiency in sleight of hand for those checks specifically.
Yeah, it makes sense if you work and operate on a ship that you would know how to tie a knot, or hopefully.
Yeah, and that's just the skill I use for it, right? Because I think that not many people are good at tying knots in reality, and not many people are good at sleight of hand in D&D, right? Your rogues are, and that's what it. Maybe the odd bard, maybe the odd kinky bard can tie a rope, but other than that, you got nothing, right? Everyone's just making kind of straight rolls. So
it's very fair.
Megan,
Anyway,
do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, sorry. Did I give final thoughts? I gave my final thoughts, I think, first.
You're like,
If you have more final thoughts, Terry, then we can just call the other ones not final thoughts. And this
No, those were truly my final thoughts. That was what was asked of me, and I delivered them.
That's fair. I personally probably will not DM a campaign where water travel or air travel exists. It does not appeal to me. However, as a player, I do love it and I do enjoy it. So don't be scared of it if you're a DM the way that I am, but it is a lot simple, and this did make me think that I could do it, but it still doesn't interest me as much as I would like it to.
I do wish this was included in the DMG.
Yeah, it makes sense that it should be at this point, but
Megan, do you have any more final thoughts, or were those your final thoughts?
no, those are my final thoughts.
Oh, anyway, that's it for this part of our discussion on Dungeons and Dragons. Please take a second to engage with a like, follow, comment, and review to help push our engagement. And don't forget to subscribe to find future inspirations for your campaigns.
If you'd like to support us, we have a store with some merch and a donate button on our website, itsamimic.com, as well as a Patreon. This episode and others can also be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and most other podcast apps. Thanks again for listening to It's a Mimic, where you never know what you're going to get.
This has been an It's a Mimic production. Please check the show notes for this episode to see links, time codes, and credits. And don't forget to reach out and share your own inspirations.
But I can guarantee I'm going to drop my fucking internet 2 or 3 times an episode.
So proud of you. It was so disorienting when you turned the cameras off, like, because I went straight into work mode where I was just like in a meeting that I don't have to pay attention to anymore.
I'm so sick of that shit. Yeah. No, man. It was good. It happens, and it? Machines, I fucking hate them.
Why are you still here? Leave already.